Welcome to the Newsletter Learning Series. This first video is titled Getting Started with Newsletters. You'll notice there wasn't an introductory video. I think everybody now knows what a newsletter is. We're going to talk about e-newsletters. So let's get started. We've got a lot of subjects to cover here in the first video, but they're all pretty short and a lot of them are probably obvious to you. We want to talk about things like goal and format, audience makeup and voice, delivery platforms, editorial calendars, newsletter pros and cons. So let's get into it. Before we think about what the newsletter should look like, let's talk about some goals. What is it we want to do with this newsletter? What is it we want to accomplish? Do we want to position ourselves as an expert? Are we just trying to stay connected with our community of customers? Do we want to increase the company's visibility? Maybe we want to fix problems or build relationships. It may also be just kind of a side note to just provide a creative outlet. You may just love to write. Let's talk for a minute about the format of the newsletter. It's important, but let's not obsess over it. The real objective here is to provide the reader with value. So let's settle some format issues. Let's think about length. Is it going to be plain text or HTML? What's going to be included in the banner and the masthead of the newsletter? What type of fonts are we going to use? What about the color scheme? And then what about links back to the website? Or what about advertising? Should we run ads in the newsletter? So let's turn our page again and let's talk about the audience makeup. Who's going to read the newsletter? Who's it going to be written for? Is it customers and clients? New prospects? Maybe just a special interest group? It's important to define the audience so the information can be shaped to suit their needs. If the information's too general, it probably won't suit anybody's interest. Over time, the audience is going to evolve, so pay attention as that transition happens. Now let's talk about the voice. Will the writing voice, will you write formally or will it be casual? Will you write in first person or third? Is the writing going to be instructive or declarative? Are you the expert or are you down in the trenches with everybody else? What about the content of the newsletter? The content's really where the value is going to be delivered, isn't it? So are we going to have one feature story or two? Are we going to tell people tips and tricks to use to save them time or money or resources? Are we going to have sidebar stories that might be shorter? Are we going to run polls or surveys? Are we going to give advice about our products? Are we going to have kind of a fix of the week? What about regular columns? What about guest writers? Those are all things that we're going to have to consider as we think about the content around the newsletter. Now let's talk about frequency and timing for a minute. The amount of time readily available resources and newsworthy stories are going to have a lot to influence over the frequency of the newsletter. Will the publication go out bi-monthly, monthly, or bi-weekly? No one has time for a weekly newsletter. Several blog posts per week maybe, but a weekly newsletter would be pretty hard to get through. It'd be pretty hard to create as well. What about the day of the week and the time of the day that the publication is going to hit the streets? What about extras or special editions when there's late breaking news in your business space? Let's talk about putting together a simple editorial calendar. This example just tracks the publication themes from month to month. But you might have an editorial calendar that might track things like story title, author, publication date, theme, priority. What's the status? Is it already written or is it a draft? Those are the kinds of things you might want to include in an editorial calendar. What about editorial guidelines? You're going to have to be able to decide what is it you're going to include and what is it that's going to be excluded. Maybe you don't want to have any information that promotes unethical internet activities. Make sure that you don't rehash any content or material that's overly similar. What about negative content towards products, companies, or individuals? There certainly shouldn't be any self-serving or promotional content. So think about some guidelines for the newsletter. Here's some companies that offer newsletter platforms. These are obvious. Some of these are pretty obvious to you. If you've taken the email marketing course, you'll notice that some of these people also do email marketing, like Constant Contact or MailChimp or iContact. Make sure that you have people opt in on your inaugural issue. Don't add their names to your publication's distribution list just because you have them. That's spam. These solutions will also help you eliminate subscribers that want to unsubscribe. You don't want to keep sending people a newsletter if they've unsubscribed or opted out. So here's some quick newsletter pros and cons. Obviously, we could use a newsletter to increase a customer's loyalty. It can build community. Newsletters over the web are pretty easy to deliver and they're very inexpensive. They're easy to start, but if you look on the other side of the column under cons, you can see that at the bottom, they're hard to keep going. It may be hard to come up with fresh material all the time. You're going to have limited space and you're going to have publication deadlines, so a newsletter is going to take some time to put together and to keep going. So let's look at the newsletter learning series that'll progress after this video is over. The second video is called Attracting an Audience, where we'll talk about building an audience, encouraging participation, gaining subscribers, and syndication. In the business side video, we'll talk about meaningful metrics and how to get started. So here's our wrap-up screen, and we can see all of the different topics that we've covered. There have been quite a few. And so what's coming up? Just to recap again, we'll talk about building an audience, encouraging some participation, gaining subscribers, and syndication. I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening.